Hello, everyone. I am Lauren from Beltline to Broadway, and I am with Brian Westbrook. I always love chatting with you, and I feel like we were chatting off camera, and we could have just kept chatting. So we're just gonna pick up where we left off.
Works
Um,
for me.
Brian, Brian is directing Side by Side Sondheim at North Raleigh Arts and Creative Theater. It opens the end
March
of this
11th.
month or in March? March
March
11th.
11th.
So,
Mhm.
okay, y'all have to get your tickets. I'm telling you right now, this one's gonna sell out. I know it is because of the music, because of Sondheim's passing, because of the people involved. So just get your tickets. If you have any questions or comments as we're going along, put them in the chat. I did put together a little very unscientific Instagram poll today asking you all what your favorite Sondheim songs are. So put those in the chat as well. I'd be curious. We had some Merrily We Roll Along. We had some Stephen Sondheim, some Sweeney Todd. So I'll be curious to see what your favorites are. I love Sweeney Todd too. um, anyway, how are you? How are rehearsals going? You just started the rehearsal process.
Yeah, rehearsals are going very well. It's super exciting. We talked about this off camera too, but we have an absolutely phenomenal cast of amazing performers, of people who are really excited about this material, who are just, an absolute joy to work with. And it's just been a lot of fun. One, to just be in the same room with people making art again. Those moments are fewer and far between these days. But just to get in there and to really dig into this material in a way that I haven't done in a long time. I certainly haven't done with other people. I've loved this stuff for decades, but to be able to have other people in the room and bounce ideas and hear how this music and these stories have touched other people, what their perspectives on them are, and to then create our evening out of all of that is really, really exciting. So rehearsals are going great.
I am very happy to hear that. For people who aren't familiar with Side by Side Sondheim, it was first done what in the 70s. I think that's where I saw the
Stunning.
first cast album.
Yeah, so 1976 is when it premiered. It premiered the same year as Pacific Overtures, which was
Mhm.
Stephen Sondheim and Hal Prince show from then. So the music in this show is only up through 1976. There's one song in there from Pacific Overtures. So that means we don't have Sweeney, we don't have Merrily We Roll Along, we don't have Into the Woods, we don't have Sunny in the Park with George. All of these that a lot of people, the shows that that's what people may know Sondheim for. They're not included in here, and that's one of the reasons that I love this version of his. There are several reviews of his work. One of the reasons I love doing this one is because the potential for people to hear things new and to hear music they have never heard before is higher. And I think his earlier stuff is just as rich and just as vibrant and varied and just as much fun too.
And sometimes it's nice to hear the earlier work because you hear those tones and colors of the later work that we love so much. And it makes it just, I don't know, when I hear the early stuff, even from Lin Manuel Miranda, I'll hear something like Bring It On. And I'm like, oh, I hear Hamilton in there. I hear those little
Mhm.
undertones. So it's
Well,
fun.
yeah, and that's the one of the other reasons to do this is because we get, the first two professional jobs he had were just as lyricist for West Side Story and for Gypsy. So he didn't write the music; he was just writing lyrics for that. And if you think about what people remember from West Side Story and remember from Gypsy, a lot of that is the lyrics. As Mama Rose's lyrics, or I Feel Pretty, or Somewhere, or A Boy Like That, and that's you can absolutely hear his love for language and his aptitude for expressing really, really meaningful, deep, stuff in short phrases.
Yeah. Yes. Now, you mentioned West Side Story. We've got this brilliant movie out right now. If you haven't seen it, you need to run and see it because it needs to be seen on the big screen. However, you're much more of a Sondheim expert than I am. I thought I remember reading or seeing somewhere that he really didn't love Side Story because that wasn't that one of his first projects, if not his first project.
It was the first professional. Well, it wasn't his first professional job. It was his first Broadway show. Was writing lyrics for West Side Story. And in his words, he is not a fan of his own lyrics in things like "I Feel Pretty." He is, and initially Leonard Bernstein was supposed to be credited as a lyricist on that, but eventually he told Sondheim, he's like, "You wrote all these lyrics, so you can." So that's why Sondheim is credited as the lyricist. Sondheim, though, he absolutely credits the success of that show to what it was, which was this amazing sort of serendipitous marriage of book, music, lyrics, dance, all of it. It was Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein, Arthur Lawrence, all of these geniuses sort of working together to create this pretty, this masterpiece. But I believe what you're probably remembering or noticing is that he does not care for some of his lyrics that he wrote. He really despises "I Feel Pretty." It's too flowery. What he says is that language is too flowery for someone of Maria's, class and where, she was, and the, for for that character.
Yeah.
But I'll take it. It's still great. Better than I could do.
Oh my goodness, and seeing it done in this new version, this new incarnation, this new movie, um, I think Rachel Ziegler just breathes new life into these lyrics that you've heard a billion times, but the way she encapsulates it, hearing Rita Moreno sing somewhere, I know she's done it before, but see you and all right. So we're not talking about West Side Story. We're going to talk about
though. You're right, we could.
Man, that so I know how much this music speaks to you. What is it that is in your mind so special about Sondheim's music and lyrics?
So it's hard for me to sort of pinpoint it, but one of the stories that I told my cast about sort of my history with Sondheim was, I was already a musical theater fan by the time I discovered Sondheim. From the time I was in elementary school. My parents were really great champions and were buying me cast albums when I was in elementary school. But it was in 1992 that I just happened to catch on PBS. PBS gave us everything back in the day. But there was a Carnegie Hall concert celebrating Sondheim on PBS in 1992. And then I knew Sin and the Clowns. That's it. Which is what most people sort of knew Sondheim for. Didn't know the show it was from, just know he wrote Sin and the Clowns. And so, but I knew that this was, I saw in the credits, Brenda Peters is going to be here. Liza Minnelli is going to be here. I'm like, well, I'm watching this. And one of the brilliant things about it was we had all these performers doing Sondheim's work, but every time they would do a new song, they would bring up the name of the show. So I got to sort of course, I taped it and watched it hundreds of times. And then one of the songs that they did was the Ballad of the Booth from Assassins. Victor Garber got up, and I saw the name of the show as Assassins, and the structure of the song is this balladeer starts singing about John Wilkes Booth. I was like, why is there a musical about John Wilkes Booth? And then Victor Garber comes out as John Wilkes Booth and then proceeds to sing this really dramatic, really amazing number about the perspective of John Wilkes Booth. And it just absolutely floored me. Just one, that something like that could be musicalized and effective. And to this day, I think Sondheim has proven the point that there is no story out there that cannot be effectively musicalized and told through the medium of musical theater. Plenty of people do it poorly. So that's that's a problem. But there is no story that cannot be effectively told that way in the right hands. But I just remember, I don't know, something about that. Just like we, in my mind, and I was a freshman in high school at that point, and you think of somebody like John Wilkes Booth as just sort of this archetypal villain, not somebody with a point of view or a perspective. And it wasn't, you know, you know, he wasn't vilifying him, but he also wasn't holding him up as a hero. He was just sort of, they were writing this story about how did this happen, trying to figure out these complicated things about human relations and why, and figure
Mhm.
out why through the medium of musical theater. And then I think through all of his work, that's the stuff that really, really lands with people for whom it lands with. And it's not for everybody. Musical theater is not for everybody. But for a kid like me, it was like, this was my way into some really complicated human emotion and human relationships, and what the medium of musical theater could be. So yeah, that's
Yes.
it.
Well, and you look at a show like Sweeney Todd, I mean, there's so many um, brilliant scores that he's written, even Send in the Clowns, that are just complicated relationships, intricate relationships, not good or bad, just an interesting study of humanity and what makes us, who is good and who is evil. That's why I love Into the Woods so much, because it really dives into these questions.
Right, and it doesn't let people off. It doesn't let them off the hook, right? You could leave at the end of Act One of Into the Woods, and everybody's fine. But you have to stay for Act Two and realize that you've got to, like, this is what happens when you do get your wish, right? Is that things can get more complicated and things can get dark.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those shows that I love because the structure of it is just kind of turns musical theater on its head. It starts out as this kind of musical comedy fairy tale that we all know and love, and it's fun and you're laughing out loud, and then it gets really dark really fast. um, most, at least I should say, I know you. When I think of you, I think of you as a performer. I've told you before, I think Gentleman's Guide, your performance in all those roles that you played in Gentleman's Guide, goes down as one of the brilliant performances in our area. So, what about performing do you bring to the directing table that maybe makes you an effective director?
Well, I don't know if I'm effective yet because this is still new to me. We'll see if it works or not. But I shouldn't say that because I've music directed before, I've choreographed before, and I actually directed this show like 10 years ago. But it's not where I'm most experienced. I think of when I am very, very clear from the beginning that I'm not trying to put my performance of anything on anybody else. So the first and foremost is that I come in as a director. I feel like, or try to come in as a director the same way that I come into a show as an audience member, wanting to be surprised, wanting to be delighted, and wanting to see what somebody else is bringing to the table. And so far, that's
Mm.
absolutely done wonders for this, is because I can go in and see what this cast is bringing and get super excited by it. Especially because, like I said, this is music that I've lived with and I've known and I've thought about forever. To have someone else come in and have even the slightest different perspective on it, it's just so exciting to me, just as a
Mm.
fan. And I will say that the one thing that, as a performer, I think that I carry with me as a director is always 100% cognizant of the audience. I'm not one of these people that can get lost in the role and forget the audience is there. The whole reason I'm doing theater is because I know that they're there, where you're breathing the same air. And so I absolutely, I don't want us to ever forget for a moment that audience is there and they are participating. They are a part of the event that's happening right then. And so we have to make sure that they're with us, at least in our minds, as we're creating it as well.
I love that so much because I do think that the audience becomes a collaborator. And when theaters, I spoke to somebody about Broadway and those theaters, and when Broadway treats its audience as a collaborator, and you see that on stage, it works so well. It just works beautifully. So how is this, are you telling me that this is one of your first directings, or you just haven't directed for a while?
This is so, I when I made my living as a performer in, in my 20s and 30s, I wasn't a director, I was a performer. And then I did direct this show in Henderson about, well, actually like 12 years ago, I think. But I have not directed since then. I've music directed some shows. I've been a choreographer on a few shows. I've AD'd on a couple things. But this is my first time, yeah, with my name like right up there. So yeah.
I love that so much, though. This is going to be very exciting. Um, Anything that you learned from the last experience directing this that you can bring into this production of it?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It was a whole different group of performers who were also like brilliant, and the same thing. That's that show and directing that 12 years ago is where I first got that notion. I was like, oh my gosh, other people experience this differently, and it's got, and I get different perspectives on it. So I knew that going into it. So that was really helpful. Um, I knew the structure of the show, what songs were in it, and so we've played a little around and I've had some serious conversations with our production team and with Tim and the cast about, um, you know these songs were written like in the first couple decades or like middle of the 20th century, and some of that language, some of the things that we laughed at back then are not the things that we laugh at today. Particularly, I'm
Mhm.
talking about the narration in the show. So when it was originally done in '76, there were three performers, two women and one man, and then there was a narrator who provided context for things, and then jokes and local color. And that is preserved in the script, which they haven't changed, since then. And so there's definitely things in there, just like getting the dates right. The show in there says, Sondheim's been around for 30 years. Well, that's not true anymore. But there are definitely things in that script that I knew from the first time we were doing it that we were probably going to have to make some adjustments to, and so that was helpful going into it. Doing a lot of prep work, a lot of prep work.
Do things land differently after COVID? I mean, everything you and I were talking about before we went on camera, everything is different in the performing arts now. Um, After COVID, everything, the way we treat each other, care for each other. So does this piece land differently after post COVID?
I mean, it's not so much COVID. I mean, certainly there's a one of the opening numbers is called "Love Is in the Air," and there's all this language in there about step outside, you'll catch it, about love and everything. And it's like, but it sounds differently, but um, I think I think more about it is just sort of what we the world's changed really quickly, right? So there are things um, there are things that I think people felt okay laughing at 30, 40 years ago, even 12 years ago, that um, that I'm not okay laughing at now. And I the way I've talked about this with my cast and production team is like there are certain lines and songs and certain dialogue and things where I'm going to tell you what I feel about it, but I want us all to sort of collaborate and talk and say, what are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with saying? And is there a way to reframe this? You know, there is there's a I'll just say there's a particular line in a song. It's called "We're Gonna Be All Right," and it's from Do I Hear Waltz, which is Sondheim wrote the lyrics, but Richard Rodgers wrote the music. It's the one show that they did together. And it's about
Mhm.
this couple. It's this couple, and they are this married couple. They're probably young, youngish, later 20s, 30s, and they're having a rough patch. But to make themselves feel better, they're looking around at all the different struggles and crap that other couples are going through, and telling themselves they're going to be all right, right? So like, look at them, like they got divorced, and she's got 9 kids, and all these other things. But there is a line in there where it's a reference to domestic violence, but it's just a throwaway line. I mean, the line is, lately he tends to hit her, and it was in 1968 or whatever when the show was done. I guess it was one of those playful things people, to the moon, Alice, honeymooners. It was the kind
Yeah.
of thing that people laughed at. I'm not okay laughing at that version of that now. But when we were at rehearsal last night, we between the performers and Jess and myself and Mark, we talked about, like, there's 5, 6, 7 different ways of doing this with a different perspective, including not saying it. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
when you guys say what's different, what feels different to me is the ability and the responsibility to look at material like that and treat it like that, as opposed to um, um, sacred or untouchable, or it doesn't matter. Instead of taking
Mm.
it for granted that people will understand it was just of its time and that's okay. Well, not everybody's going to know that. We can't, and so we have to make that decision as artists in this moment, in the show. What are we okay with saying? What's the best thing for the show? And Sondheim himself said it. This is the other reason that I feel completely fine with it, is that he said on multiple occasions that theater, musical theater and songs and music, these are not museum pieces. They are meant to be changed. They are not meant to stay the same and stay static. He changed his lyrics for performers several times over the years. He
Mm.
changed some stuff in company. If you look at West Side Story, I think the primary reason that this movie version of West Side Story works so well now is because of what Tony Kushner has done with that book and done to the script, and placed more context around it, and has put more responsibility on the audience to make up our own minds about what we're seeing there. So I think I feel more of a responsibility as an artist now than I did, I think, 2 years ago, to myself and my own integrity as an artist, but to my fellow performers and to the people we're performing for.
I agree with that. And I will be, there's we look back on a lot of these older pieces in musical theater, and they are problematic, and it's how do we contextualize them for now, and Company is a perfect example.
Hmm.
What they're doing with this new version of Company. Um we lost Stephen Sondheim. We were talking about this on Black Friday last year. Obviously this show has been in your head for a really long time because you worked on it before, but um show seasons are planned pretty far in advance, so it's not reactionary to his passing. But does it take on any meaning, any kind of different meaning or significance to you now approaching it since he recently passed?
Absolutely, and I thought about it, um, not for too long, because I really pretty quickly came to the conclusion that um, we should absolutely not ignore the fact that this giant among us passed, last year, and just sort of go on as if it didn't happen. And so I I very much I want his memory and the memory of him, and this to be a tribute to him and his work. I mean, it is a celebration of his work on its own, but I also, um, I wanted his face and his silhouette on the poster. I'm interested in having his image up in the theater, and so that people understand that these are songs and these are great, and there's lots that you can learn from them, but these are all because of one man, and this man is no longer here. Um, and and we mentioned it in the dialogue as well. It's part of the dialogue was mentioning when he was born and everything, and I was like, we can't just say that without saying the fact that that he passed away. So we are absolutely, we are not ignoring that at all. I have a I have a cutout. I have lots of pictures of Sondheim. I have him behind my head. And my dear friend Heather, who gave me that, also had given me this cardboard cutout of Stephen Sondheim that is now sitting in the theater. And so he's with us at every rehearsal, um, sometimes comforting, sometimes watching, sometimes leering. But he is in the theater with us, uh, you know, the entire time.
Are there any composers still living that you think are comparable to Mr. Sondheim?
Uh, Yes, I can say without a doubt, absolutely. There are composers out there with the level of talent and the level of skill that can do it. I think that unfortunately, the reason we don't see them is because we aren't allowing new material to be championed at the
Mm.
one place where we need it, which is in New York and on Broadway. We aren't, and I say that knowing that sometimes his own shows are the ones who are getting up there. They'll think it's amazing, and revivals are great, but we haven't been championing new work, new music, new stories, and young artists um, in musical theater. We have not been doing that for a long time, and so absolutely, they're out there. They're absolutely out there composing and working away, and they have been for a while. But you have to dig deeper to find them. I think you can find them in singer songwriters. Um, you know, I'm a massive fan of Audra McDonald, as everyone should be. But one of the reasons I love her is because she has been a champion for unknown composers since she started putting out albums, which was back in '95 when Ragtime came out. All of her albums, she is always championing new composers. Um, you know, she was singing Jason Robert Brown music before Jason Robert Brown's music was on Broadway. And so, yeah, they're out there. And I wish people with money would give some up to them so that they could get their work done.
Susan said all our three named composers.
Right. Michael John
And
Lacusa, Jason Robert Brown, all of them. Yeah.
yes, and when I was thinking about this earlier and thinking about our conversation, I do think Jason Robert Brown is a similar type of really cerebral, thoughtful, storytelling kind of composer. Um, Very much to me, at least in my in my
He's
pea
yeah,
brain.
he's absolutely so in his own right. I think one of the things that attracts me to his music is there is a pop sensibility, and singers love it, right? It attracts singers like everybody loves singing Jason Robert Brown. Like, you don't always want to take that into an audition, because accompanists, sometimes we hate Jason Robert Brown because it's complicated. Um, but he absolutely has. He's one of those that this is his medium. He is going to compose this music. I think Adam Gettle is the one that I think of that I associate most with Sondheim. One, because I mean, they're might as well related. So Adam Gettle, who did Light in the Piazza, the music for Light in the
Mhm.
Piazza, is the son of Mary Rogers, the grandson of Richard Rogers. And so Mary Rogers and Stephen Sondheim were very, very close friends. And so Steve Sondheim knew Adam Gettle growing up, so it's all sort of in the family. Um, and I remember reading years ago, it still pisses me off. Adam Gettle, who wrote Light in the Piazza and Floyd Collins, two shows that I absolutely love. Um, uh, he has almost a complete score written for a musical version of The Princess Bride, but it has never been produced. It's just sitting there, and
Mhm.
they were going to produce it, and it all fell apart and everything. And that, I hate that we are deprived of stuff like that, because people won't take a risk on it.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. I'd love to see a Princess Bride musical, and I
Right.
do think Light in the Piazza, thank you for reminding me about Light in the Piazza, is just a gorgeous score. So we'll have to make that a musical Monday and share that share that cast album with everybody because it's just beautiful. And I think people can still see it, like on Great Performances. Kelly, I think it's
It's
still out there.
weird. I think there's some musical theater mafia that holds the keys behind these shows. Sometimes it's available. It'll be available for like 20 minutes on Broadway HD, but then I don't know. You just have to catch it somewhere. I happen to have it on VHS. It's the only reason I still have a VCR.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Um, is there a through line? I was really thinking about this afternoon, that you have found in Sondheim's music that kind of connects one show to another, or is it all just distinct, just depending on the period? Like, are there, you look at some composers, like you look at Queen, and there's periods of Queen music you can very much identify. Are there periods of the Sondheim music that you can go, this was the
Yeah.
whatever
So
period?
so generally people think of Sondheim shows in two sections, which is sort of the Hal Prince years. So he and Hal Prince were collaborators on Company, on Follies, A Little Night Music, Funny Thing Happened on the Forum, Pacific Overtures, and Merrily We Roll Along. And then Merrily We Roll Along was very famously, not a financial success and was very troubled, and their collaboration stopped then. And then the other sort of section of his work is the James Lapine years. James Lapine, who wrote the book for Sunday in the Park with George, and also for Into the Woods. So I think if we had to categorize it, that's it. I think Stephen Sondheim's his show, each show is definitely very, very distinct in sort of its subject matter and its reason for being, right? So they're just no one could have guessed that you'd get something like Sweeney Todd or Assassins, as a Broadway show, much less as a successful Broadway show. But he tended to stay with collaborators that he worked really, really well with. They worked with the same orchestrator and the same conductors, year after year after year, and decade after decade. As far as the things that I think about that are signifiers to me of his music, melodically and lyrically, and this is the show, the word that my cast keeps hearing me say is that it's always surprising, for better or for worse, or for like delight or for darkness. There's always it's a surprise as to where it's going to go, melodically and harmonically. Musically, I think for sure, I think Sin in the Clowns is a very accessible melody, but he wrote it in these really, really short, stunted phrases because he wrote it for Glynis Johns, who wasn't a singer. And Glynis Johns, who like was in Mary Poppins and everything, she wasn't a singer. And so he wrote, "Isn't it rich? Cut off so she could breathe. Aren't we a pair? Cut off so she could breathe." That's the reason that song exists musically the way that it does, and it just happened to become a hit. He writes everything for the situation that it's in. And if he can, he writes it for the performer that's doing it. You know what I mean? He's never thinking about posterity and writing it, for the ages. It just sort of happens to work out that way because the personal is universal. If you really, really make something personal and really look for what is it that we're really getting at here, the more people will understand it. I do believe that.
What do you think his legacy? We talked about looking back at Rodgers and Hammerstein, and you look back at their canon of work, and it feels nostalgic and lovely, and Learn Low, same thing. It's nostalgic and lovely. What do you think his legacy is going to be, or is?
I don't know. For me, one of the things that's really lasting and that is still, the reason this work is still done and still works today is because Whereas Lerner and Lowe, Rodgers and Hammerstein, and Cole Porter and Harold Arlen and Jerome Kern and all of them, you know, emotionally and story wise, there was always a very nice sort of sweet ending to it, you know, or it was aspirational and hopeful. And as we got into the 60s and 70s and 80s with Sondheim and with Lapine and with Harold Prince and all his collaborators, the risks that they took was, we're not going to let our audiences off the hook, right? You know, we are not going to give them this super sweet tied up ending necessarily. With Company, we're not even going to give them a plot. We're not going to give them, you know, all of these things that we've come to expect, that audiences had come to expect. You know, the audiences that came to see Company, you know, in 1970, they were not used to seeing themselves on stage. Certainly not seeing themselves on stage portrayed in a what could be viewed as a cynical view. You know what I mean? So I think that has allowed other composers, other artists to say, we can dig deeper and we can be more vulnerable about our neuroses and about, you know, the things that trouble us, and be real and honest about the fact that not everything always works out, that sometimes things don't, but even when they don't, they keep going, something happens, you know, and you know,
Yeah.
it just turns into something new, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so hopefully I think that means that we'll keep having artists taking those risks um, and making new stuff.
And what I love is you and I were talking about Tick Tick Boom before we went on camera, and I loved seeing Sondheim portrayed in that and seeing how he influenced not just Jonathan Larson, because it was more symbolic of how he's influenced so many songwriters, even songwriters we have yet to know,
Oh yeah,
that are coming down the pike. So yeah,
and
I love that. That
he you know, sometimes he considered teaching to be the sacred profession. He considered teaching to be the highest form of service that you can do to this world, and the highest way to be useful. I think it's another thing I identify with. I'm from a family of teachers too, and you know, there's a great series you can see on YouTube of him doing these master classes where he's working with students who are singing his pieces. And there's he did a workshop in the UK when they were doing Sunday in the Park with George over there for emerging songwriters and composers over there. And that's why in Tick Tick Boom, we were talking about it, it just was so perfect the way that he was put into that, you know, and because that's who he was, you know. You know, Oscar Hammerstein, who was his mentor growing up, and he often says that if Oscar Hammerstein had been a geologist, he would have been a geologist. He just wanted to do whatever Oscar Hammerstein did. But when he gave Steve Sondheim like a gift just before he died, and it said, "To Stephen, my friend and teacher," and it's always been very, very, you know, almost as much, if not more important to him at times than the composing, than the making of art.
Mhm. Um, do you have a favorite Sondheim song?
That's not fair. Um,
I know. Well, okay, what's your favorite Sondheim song at this moment?
right now, um,
That's speaking to you right now.
yeah. To be honest with you, it's the one that's the catchiest that I love. It's from Follies, and then we did it last night at rehearsal. It's called "You're Gonna Love Tomorrow," um, and it's two couples. It's one of the catchier tunes that he ever did. It's another one that I don't think anybody or most people aren't going to know. You know, we actually replaced a song in the show with this one, and one couple comes out and sings their melody and sings about what their life is going to be, and they go away, and then this other couple comes out and they sing a completely different melody about how their life is going to be, and then they come together and they sing it together, and it works in this brilliant mathematical counterpuntal, just jolly, jaunty, catchy as hell tune. So that's the one that I've been singing for 2 days.
Ooh, I love that. I love it when they do the counterpoint. I love that. So I can't wait to see it. Favorite Sondheim show? I know, equally as unfair question, but it's fine.
Well, so I always say Sunny in the Park with George, and the reason I say that, well, and you know as well as I, the favorite is a word that doesn't really mean anything, right? So there's like there's all sorts of things to love about different shows, but Sunny in the Park with George was the one that just like a lightning bolt hit me at the right time when I was a junior in high school, and again PBS put it on, and you saw it on Tick Tick Boom when they were sitting there watching it. I was like, that was me. Like, the same night I was in Henderson, North Carolina, watching that damn thing on PBS, and and to this day, that production, but that show, really just it gives me hope, and you know, it's real beauty. I love it.
It is a show I've never seen live, so I would love someone's got to do it around here because I'd love to actually see it.
Yeah.
But yeah. Um, so this show opens March 11th. It opens at NRACT, with all of the COVID precautions, so mask wearing, vaccines, all of the things. I for me feel very safe going to the theater because I know everyone's vaccinated and everyone's masked in that building. And I really hope everyone will see this show because the music is such a celebration of this life that gave us so much music. Susan's saying she's so excited. I am too. I'm very excited. So and I'm very happy I got to hang out with you. And I'm excited that you got Stephen Sondheim right over your head behind you. This makes me happy. He's watching all of us.
Absolutely.
Anyway, March 11th, I'm going to put the NRACT website on the screen, NRACT.org. You can get your tickets now. And I would suggest you do because, like, and I think this one's going to sell out, and hear this glorious music by these extraordinary singers. And
Yeah.
thanks, Brian, for hanging out with
Thank you,
me.
Lauren.
I just, hanging out with you is like going to a cup of coffee with an old friend. I just feel like, it's just
It's
lovely.
never not fun. It's never not fun. You are lovely. Thank you for all you do, and yeah, I'll come back anytime.
Please do, please do. And I will see you soon. I want to tell everybody I don't have any other chats coming up, but you're going to want to listen to the podcast this Sunday. I have an incredible conversation with Glenn Turman, who most recently was in Women in the Movement. So that will drop on Sunday. I want you all to listen to what he has to say. He made his Broadway debut at the age of 12 in Raisin in the Sun with Sydney B. and Ruby D. I'm like, where do you go from there? So everyone's going to want to listen to that. And we have our coloring night. We're doing a Hamilton coloring night, third Wednesday of the month, with our friends at Coloring Broadway, who are huge Sondheim fans, but will be coloring from Hamilton. So anyway, somebody who must be related to you says they'll hear from Henderson for this play. So thank you, Linnea.
That's my mom.
Anyway,
that's my mama.
Well, I hope to be there opening night and seeing it with her and with all your friends from Henderson.
Yay.
Anyway, thank you much for joining me. Thank you everyone for watching. If you tuned in late, you can watch this from the beginning here on Facebook, or it'll be on the website. And I will see you soon. Just take care, Brian, and good break legs. I don't want to say good luck,
Thank
break
you.
legs with rehearsal.
Thank you.
I will see
Take
you
care.
soon.
You too. Bye.
Good night, everyone.